The lawsuit against my family's workshop demanded $4.7 million, and for a year the only one who knew I cried myself to sleep over it was a username, River at Midnight, on a 2 a.m. confession app called Marrow. I did not know he was the man whose signature ended my family's business. My name is Noel Calloway. I grew up under a sign that still reads Calloway and Sons, even though there has never once been a son. My grandfather Arthur painted it himself in 1961, and by the time my father was old enough to point that out, the letters had already cracked into the wood like a promise nobody quite meant to keep. Nobody ever repainted it. I used to hate that sign. Now I think my grandfather simply ran out of time before he ran out of daughters and granddaughters left to prove wrong. We restore furniture for a living. Staircases, banisters, 100-year-old dining tables that families are too sentimental to throw away and too broke, suddenly, to replace. The workshop smells the way it has smelled my entire life: sawdust and old varnish, and the particular mineral sharpness of steel wool, and some mornings that smell is the only thing that convinces me the world still makes sense. I learned to sand with the grain before I learned to ride a bicycle. My grandfather used to say a piece of furniture remembers every hand that ever touched it kindly, and holds on to that kindness longer than it holds on to anything else, including the person who gave it. My grandfather had one rule that outlived him by decades. Every piece that left the workshop carried a note hidden somewhere inside it, folded small, written in his own hand, never signed, a drawer bottom, the underside of a railing, a blessing for a stranger he would never live to meet. I thought it was a sweet, useless habit for 26 years. Then it saved my family's life, but that comes later. My mother, Vivian, died after a long illness when I was 22. After that my father stopped sleeping through the night, and I stopped expecting him to. He ran the business alone, generously, the way men do when grief makes them soft in exactly the wrong places. I quietly took over the invoices and the insurance and every part of running a company that requires you to still believe there will be a future to run it into. Somebody had to. Watching him try broke something in me every single time, and I let it, because the alternative was watching him stop trying at all. 14 months ago we installed a restored staircase and iron railing at a gala for the Hartwell Foundation, using structural brackets supplied under contract by Wexford Dynamics, the largest architectural hardware manufacturer in the state. Halfway through the evening, in front of 200 people in evening wear, the railing gave way. A woman named Eleanor Pratt fell 4 feet onto a marble floor and broke her hip. Every instinct my father had, all 40 years of them, said the failure was in the metal, not the mounting. Wexford Dynamics said it was us. They sued us for $4.7 million. Enough to take the workshop. Enough to take the house behind it, the one my grandfather built with the same hands that painted that sign. My father has a weak heart and a genius for guilt, and somewhere in the first month of the lawsuit he quietly decided we probably deserved it. I stopped sleeping around the same time the first legal letter arrived. I would lie awake doing math on our bank account until 3 in the morning, until a friend from design school sent me a link to an app called Marrow, built for exactly that hour and no other. No photos allowed. No real names allowed. You picked a screen name, tagged whatever was keeping you up, and the app matched you with a stranger carrying something adjacent to your own weight. I tagged mine honestly. A responsibility I never asked for. A fight I am probably going to lose. I named myself Marigold after my mother's favorite flower, and 11 minutes later a username called River at Midnight said hello. He told me much later that he had set his own filters on purpose that first night, looking specifically for anyone tagged with sudden responsibility, a weight handed down instead of chosen. He never told me why not then. I never asked. That was the only rule of Marrow that actually mattered. You could be completely unknown to someone and completely known by them at exactly the same time, and it turned out that was enough. For the first few weeks he mostly listened. Then he started talking back, and I learned he had lost his father recently too, suddenly, and inherited something enormous and complicated that he was not sure he had been built to carry. We never traded names, cities, or faces. We traded the truth instead, which felt on the worst nights like the fairer exchange by far. It never once occurred to me to guess who he really was. Some nights I did not even let myself wonder, because a stranger cannot disappoint you the way someone with a name and a face eventually will, and I did not have room that year for one more disappointment. He told me once, almost in passing, that his username was not as random as it looked. My mother used to call me that. Before she died, he wrote, almost nobody does anymore, only my sister sometimes. When she forgets I am supposed to be all grown up now. I did not ask what the name actually was. I only understood that he had built a hiding place for himself out of the one word he had left of her, and that he had chosen to spend it on a stranger rather than let it go quiet forever. He had one line he repeated so often it became a kind of anchor for me. If you were ever really in danger, I would tear apart anything standing between us. Only you. I fell asleep some nights just repeating it back to myself like a superstition that had somehow started working. Once, unprompted, he told me about a banister in his childhood home, handmade one of a kind that his father always said not to touch because it wasn't only wood. There had been a note folded into the underside of it once, he said, from whoever built it, long before he was born. Something about always having somewhere to come home to. I think about that note more than a grown man probably should, he wrote. I did not think much of it at the time. Half the good old houses in this state have a Callaway repair hiding somewhere inside them, under a stair or behind a drawer. I had no reason yet to connect one stranger's fondest memory to my own grandfather's handwriting, so I let it pass the way you let most beautiful things pass when you are too tired to hold on to anything extra. Another night, weeks later, he wrote something that frightened me a little, though I could not have told you why at the time. There is a report sitting on my desk that could ruin a family that did nothing wrong, he said. Everyone around me insists I am wrong to keep looking at it. I told him that sounded like a decision he already knew how to make, deep down, whether he wanted to admit it yet or not. He went quiet for a long time before he answered, I hope you are right. I have never wanted to be told I was right about anything more than I wanted it that night, and I did not even know what we were talking about. 11 days before the final settlement conference, the notice came by courier instead of mail, which is how you learn a law firm wants you to feel small before you have even opened the envelope. My father read it twice at the kitchen table and folded it in half, as if that might make the number inside smaller. $4.7 million, printed in a font that did not care that it was ending us. 11 days, I told myself, was not nothing. 11 days was enough time to find one thing they had missed. Harold Pruitt had been my father's friend for 30 years and a real estate developer for 20, and he started coming by more often once the lawsuit made the local paper. He always brought coffee. He always said some version of the same sentence, gentler each time, which somehow made it worse. Take the settlement, Warren. Sell the workshop land before the bank takes it for nothing at all. I already have a buyer ready the day you say yes. I did not like how fast his buyer seemed to already exist. I did not say so out loud, not yet, because I did not have anything except a feeling, and a feeling has never once held up in a courtroom. That night I told River I had met a man who smiled like a going out of business sale wearing a friendly face. He laughed so hard he had to send 3 separate messages just to finish one sentence. Marry someone who at least waits until the funeral is over, he wrote. I am available. I come with excellent references. You do not even know what I look like, I typed back, mostly to make him keep talking. I know exactly what you look like, he wrote. You look like someone worth waiting for. I read that message more times than I will ever admit to another living person, and for exactly one night, the number $4.7 million did not feel like the only true thing about my life. 10 days before the hearing, Wexford Dynamics called us in for a formal deposition, and I saw him for the first time without having the smallest idea it was him. Their lobby had 41 floors of black glass stacked overhead and smelled like money, trying very hard not to smell like anything at all. I was sitting on a leather bench that cost more than my car when a man crossed the room fast, phone pressed to his ear, jaw tight, and for one full second I forgot how to breathe. I did not know his name yet. I only knew that something about the set of his shoulders made my chest hurt in a way I had absolutely no business feeling toward a stranger who worked for the company trying to bury my family alive. I told myself it was stress. I told myself a great many things that year that were not true, and that was only the first of them. Inside the conference room, someone said his name for me before I had to ask. Griffin Wexford, Chief Executive Officer. He sat at the head of the table, like a man still learning the exact shape of the chair underneath him, and I filed the name away and thought almost nothing else of it, because I had a much louder problem sitting directly across from me in a suit that cost more than our monthly overhead. Desmond Voss ran that deposition like a man who had never once in his life been told no and made to believe it. He was Wexford Dynamics' chief operating officer, and he seemed to decide within the first 5 minutes that the fastest way through the morning was to make my father feel small in front of his own daughter. He called our installation log sloppy. He called 40 years in the trade sentimental, said with the particular contempt of a man who has never once built anything with his own hands. Sentimental men make sloppy craftsmen, Mr. Calloway, he said, and smiled the exact way people smile when they already believe they have won something before the fight has even started. My father tried, quietly, to explain that the bracket had failed at the weld seam, not at the mounting bracket itself, which was the only part his crew had ever touched. Voss waved the sentence away before my father had finished it. Every bracket that leaves our facility is certified through Ashcroft before it ever ships, he said, almost bored, the way a man states a fact he considers a personal favor to share out loud. That is not something anyone in this room can argue with, Mr. Calloway. Yours is the only name on the installation permit, and yours is the only name that matters. I wrote it down out of pure habit, the way you write down anything a lawyer says with that particular tone of finality. I had no idea yet that he had just handed me, for free, the one thread that would eventually pull his entire cover apart. At the recess, I stepped into the hallway to breathe and to tell River, in the only language I had left that day, that I did not think I could survive the rest of the morning. I typed it fast, sent it before I could talk myself out of it, and slipped back into the conference room 40 seconds later, expecting nothing at all. That is when I saw it. A phone lying face up on the table in front of the empty chair at the head of it, screen still lit from a notification, one line visible before a hand closed over it a half-second too late to matter. Marigold, I don't think I can do this. My own words, sitting on a stranger's phone, in the single room in the entire city where I least expected to ever see them again. I told myself it was a coincidence. Marigold was not that rare a name, I told myself, even though I have never once in my life met another one. I told myself that for 6 more days, because the alternative was a thought too enormous to hold while I was also trying to save my family's entire business from a number with too many zeros in it. I did not yet let myself the thought all the way to its end. I did not yet know that the empty chair at the head of that table belonged to Griffin Wexford, who had walked back into the room exactly as I had walked out of it. My father collapsed in the workshop 2 days after the deposition, not dramatically. Just a hand pressed flat against his chest and a slow, careful slide into a chair that frightened me more than any lawsuit ever had. The doctor used the words stress, cardiac event, and rest in that exact order, like a sentence being read aloud in a courtroom. I sat in the hallway outside his room afterward and did not cry, because I had promised myself a long time ago that I would stop being the kind of person who cried in hospital hallways. I broke that promise within the hour quietly, in a stairwell where no one could hear me do it. I told River that night, in the small pieces I was still allowed to give a stranger. My father is sick, and some part of me thinks it is my fault, and I am so tired I do not know my own name some mornings. He did not try to fix any of it. He stayed on the line and typed small, useless, perfect things instead. You are allowed to be tired. I am not going anywhere, tonight or any other night. If you were ever in real danger, I would tear apart anything standing between us to get to you. Only you. I believed him the way you believe a stranger at 2 a.m, completely and without one single piece of evidence, because the only alternative left was believing no one at all, and I did not have the strength that week for that particular kind of nothing. The days after that blurred together into something gray and repetitive. Pruitt came by twice more, softer each time, which only made it worse, the way a hand can be gentle and still be closing around your throat. My father grew quieter, smaller, faster than I wanted to admit out loud to anyone, including River. I stopped opening Marrow some nights and opened my father's old installation logs instead, because underneath all the grief and all the fear I still believed in exactly one thing, which was craftsmanship, the same thing my grandfather believed in enough to hide a note in every piece he ever finished. Every log from the gala job was clean, torque specifications followed to the letter, photographs taken at every stage, time-stamped, initialed. My father had done everything correctly, every single step of it, which meant the only thing left unaccounted for in the entire chain was the hardware itself, sitting inside a folder somewhere on the 39th floor of a building that smelled like money. I wrote the batch number down on an index card and kept it in my coat pocket like a talisman I did not yet understand the use of. Batch 114C. I had no idea yet that Desmond Voss had already told me out loud, in a deposition room, exactly where to go looking for it. 3 nights before the hearing, I found my father at the kitchen table with Harold Pruitt's settlement papers already signed on his side of the line, waiting only for mine. "Just make it stop, Noel," he said, and he looked so small saying it, smaller than I had ever seen him, that something in me finally went still instead of breaking any further. I took the pen out of his hand. "Not like this," I told him. "Give me until the hearing. If I am wrong about what I think I know, you can sign anything you want and I will never bring it up again." He did not argue with me. I think, by then, he was simply too tired to, and some part of me was almost grateful for that, because I do not know that I could have held my resolve against him if he had fought me on it. 2 days before the hearing, I called Wexford Dynamics and requested an off-the-record meeting with Griffin Wexford directly, citing new findings in the installation records. I told myself, walking into that building for the 3rd time in 2 weeks, that it was purely a professional decision. I did not let myself examine the second, smaller reason sitting underneath it, the one that had kept me awake longer than the lawsuit had. He agreed to see me alone, no lawyers present, in an office on the 39th floor with a window looking out over a city that had never once been kind to my family in my entire lifetime. I laid the logs across his desk and walked him through the Turk numbers, the photographs, the timestamps, my voice steadier than I actually felt underneath it. He listened without interrupting once, the exact way River always listened, and I told myself firmly that this meant absolutely nothing at all. He was halfway through asking me a careful question about the weld seam when the office door opened without a knock, and a young woman leaned halfway into the room, laughing about something from the hallway behind her, a badge dangling from her fingers. "River, you left your card downstairs at security again," she said. "Mom would be so unimpressed with you right now." He turned toward that name the way a person turns toward their own reflection in a shop window, without thinking about it first, already halfway into a small, automatic smile for his sister before he had even fully turned around. I did not breathe again for what felt like a very long time. "She is the only one who still calls me that," he said once his sister had gone, half apologizing for the interruption, already moving back toward the logs on his desk as if nothing had happened at all. "Family thing. It does not mean anything out here." It meant everything in the world. It meant a name I had heard in exactly one other place in my entire life, at 2 in the morning, from a stranger who once told me his mother used to call him that, and that almost nobody used it anymore, and that he had built himself an entire hiding place out of the one word he had left of her. "Does the name Marigold mean anything to you?" I asked, and I watched his whole face change the way a house changes when the power goes out, all at once and completely, with no warning at all beforehand. "You," he said, very quietly. "It is you, it has been you this entire time, and I never once put it together, and I do not know how to forgive myself for that yet." We sat in a silence that had an entire year folded up small inside it. I do not remember deciding to speak first. I only remember that when I finally did, my voice came out smaller than I had meant it to. "You told me your father died and left you something enormous to carry. You never once told me his company was the one suing mine into the ground." "I did not know," he said, and I believed him immediately, because the horror written across his face in that moment was not the kind of thing a person can perform convincingly on command. I signed whatever Desmond put in front of me for months, because my father trusted him for 20 years before I ever did, and grief makes even good men remarkably easy to lie to. I saw the name Calloway 100 times in those filings, and it never once felt like anything but ink on a page. I never connected it to a stranger on an app I only opened, because I could not stand being alone in my own house anymore. He asked to see the logs again, this time actually looking, the way you look at something once you understand it might cost you everything if you get it wrong. He asked about the batch number stamped in small print in the corner of one photograph, a number I had circled in pen without fully knowing why. "Batch 114C. He went very still reading it, the particular stillness of a person right before they remember something they have spent a long time, trying very hard not to. "There was a flag on that batch," he said quietly, almost to himself. 2 weeks before the gala. I saw it once, buried in a stack of routine paperwork Desmond told me not to bother worrying about. I did not worry about it. God help me, I signed the stack and I did not worry about it at all. That was the day the real digging started, and it was also the day I understood that grief and guilt and love are not always 3 separate feelings arriving one at a time. Sometimes they arrive wearing the exact same coat, and you cannot tell them apart until much later. Griffin told me what happened after I left that office, in pieces, over the days that followed, and I have replayed it in my head so many times since that it feels, at this point, almost like I was standing in the room myself. So let me tell it the way I have come to picture it, the way he lived it without me. He went looking for the original file that night, and found nothing where it should have lived, not in the shared drive, not in the archived correspondence. Not in a single folder anywhere in the building with his own name on it, though he was, technically, the only person with the authority to open every folder that existed. Desmond Voss found him standing over an empty file drawer a little after 11, and did not bother pretending anymore that there was nothing to find. There was never a report, Desmond said, calm as a man discussing the weather outside, and even if there had been one once, your father would still be alive today if he had let me handle things my way from the very beginning. Do not make his exact mistake twice in one lifetime, Griffin. Not for a girl you built an entire fantasy around without ever once seeing her face. Griffin told me those words landed somewhere he did not know he could still be hit. He stood in that office a long time after Desmond left it, staring at an empty drawer that used to hold the one thing that could save a family he had grown, without meaning to love before he ever knew her name. He called me an hour later and told me he thought he had lost the only proof that could save us, and that he was sorry, and that sorry was never going to be enough for what his own signature had already done, and I could hear, for the first time in an entire year of knowing his voice, real fear living inside it. I did not let him finish apologizing. I asked him one question instead, the one Desmond himself had handed us both weeks earlier without ever meaning to. Every bracket that leaves your facility is certified through Ashcroft before it ships. He said it himself, in the deposition, like it was something to be proud of. If that is true, Griffin, then it does not only exist somewhere inside your building, it exists somewhere he cannot reach it at all. There was a silence on the line long enough that I genuinely thought I had lost the call entirely. Then he said, I love you, and I am about to go get our proof back, and both of those things happened to be true at exactly the same moment. Called Ashcroft's compliance off himself at midnight, using every last ounce of leverage his family's name still carried in that industry, and by 4 a.m. he had a fully certified copy of the original safety flag on batch 114C, filed 9 days before the gala, along with a complete routing record showing precisely who at Wexford Dynamics had received it, and precisely who had instructed the outside engineers to look the other way instead. The hearing began at 10 the next morning. Desmond Voss walked in already smiling, the exact same smile from the deposition weeks earlier, the smile of a man who believes he has already won something before the fight has even started. My father sat beside me with his hand shaking slightly around a cup of coffee he never once managed to drink. I did not tell him what I knew yet. I wanted him to watch it happen in real time, the way I had earned the right to watch it happen myself. Wexford Dynamics outside counsel opened the morning by asking, once more, for judgment in the full amount of $4.7 million, citing installation negligence as though the phrase alone had ever been enough to make it true. Griffin stood up before his own attorney had even finished sitting back down. I would like to enter something into the record myself, he said, and I have never in my entire life heard a room go quiet that fast or that completely. He laid out the Ashcroft certification, the original flag on batch 114C, the internal routing log carrying Desmond Voss's own signature, acknowledging receipt 9 full days before the gala. The email still fully intact on an external server Desmond had never once controlled, instructing the engineering team to proceed with installation blame framing, instead of an actual recall. The installation was correct from the very first bolt, Griffin said. My company's hardware was not. My company knew, and chose silence over honesty, and I am not willing to let a family lose absolutely everything to protect a decision I never made and would never have signed off on had I known the truth in time to stop it. Desmond Voss stopped smiling somewhere in the middle of that sentence. He started talking instead, quickly, about context and nuance in protecting the company through a difficult leadership transition, and nobody left in that room was listening to a single word of it anymore. Building security walked him out less than 40 minutes later. It was Wexford Dynamics' own outside counsel who used the word fraud out loud first, followed almost immediately by obstruction, followed by a quiet promise that the entire matter would be referred to the state attorney's office before the week was out. The $4.7 million claim against Callaway and Sons was withdrawn with prejudice before noon. Eleanor Pratt's original claim was redirected, correctly this time, to Wexford Dynamics' own insurers, exactly where it should have gone 14 months earlier. Harold Prout's Ready Buyer turned out to be a shell company with precisely one silent investor, and once everyone in that room understood exactly who that investor had always been, Prout stopped returning my father's calls entirely, which was, in the end, the single kindest thing he ever did for our family. My father cried openly in the hallway afterward, the way he had not once let himself in over a year, and for the first time since my mother died, neither one of us apologized to the other for it. 3 weeks later, Griffin brought me to the house he had grown up in, the one his family still owned, and led me down a front hallway to a staircase with a banister so old and so carefully kept that I recognized my own grandfather's hand in it before he had said a single word about it. He turned the railing over carefully, the way you handle something that has already survived one entire lifetime before you were even born, and there, folded into the same hidden groove my grandfather always used without fail, was a note gone soft and brown with age. The handwriting was unmistakably his own. May whoever finds this always have somewhere to come home to. I have had that note memorized since I was 7 years old, Griffin said quietly. I simply never once knew whose hand had written it, not until you. I did not cry then, though I probably should have. I only reached out and pressed my palm flat against the old wood, the same way my grandfather must have, decades before either of us was born, before he folded up one small wish for two strangers he already knew he would never live to meet. I already had somewhere to come home to, I had simply not known his name yet. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story.